Worker in Italy who was rescued from under a partially collapsed medieval tower after nearly 12 hours has died in hospital. The Romanian national was part of a team restoring the Torre dei Conti near the Colosseum in Rome. The BBC's Sarah Rainsford has the details.
His rescue was initially described as an exceptional feat by firefighters who'd worked late into the night using drones and rubble clearers trying to reach him, despite the risk that the fragile tower could collapse further. All day, the man had been conscious and talking to the emergency workers. But in the ambulance, his heart stopped, and doctors at the hospital he was rushed to couldn't save him. He had been carrying out conservation work on the medieval tower, which is part of the Roman Forum, one of this city's busiest tourist sites. But this particular building had been empty and abandoned for many years.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Wepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Zambian football legend Christopher Kadongo has praised the growing competitiveness of the African club football competition. And the Live Golf League has announced its qualifying opportunities for prospective members. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Gratitude begins with a story. Find yours on Channel Africa. Now streaming on our new website and mobile app. Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Oh, thank you to Jwalani Tulongwepe with our news update and Figile Lingwati with our sports headlines. It is 12:07 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa on DSTV's Audio Bouquet Channel 802, OpenView Channel 628, and on www.channelafrica.co.za, as well as on the SABC Plus app, available on the Apple and Google Play stores. Join us in conversation on our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook at Channel Africa, you can also send us your comments and voice notes to +2763 at 406 9126 #Africa Update, and let us know which country you're in. And if you have any stories that you'd like us to highlight or to focus on, send us an email. It is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or give us a call on +27 11 714 4459.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Well, today on #Africa Update Asks, a new report shows that inequality is making the world more vulnerable to pandemics and is based on 2 years of research. Now, our question to you today is, how can Africa address inequality to ensure that it is no longer vulnerable to pandemics? Share your thoughts and your views on all our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram at Channel Africa 1, on Facebook at Channel Africa. You can also send us your comments and voice notes to +2763 at 406 9126 #Africa Update Us.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
It is 9 after 12 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Now, the US President Donald Trump has again threatened to use military action to try and stop the alleged killing of Christians in Nigeria. Now, the US President recently added Africa's most populous country to a list of nations the US says has violated religious freedoms. Ira Spitzer reports from Washington.
U.S. President Trump addressed the issue of military strikes in Nigeria again aboard Air Force One on the way back to Washington from his vacation home in Florida. In response to a question from reporters about whether he could see the U.S. deploying troops or conducting airstrikes, the president responded, "could be," and alleged again that Christians in Nigeria were being killed in large numbers, and said that he wasn't going to let that happen. The situation on the ground remains murkier, with some analysts saying that more Muslims than Christians have been killed by Islamist militant groups operating in Nigeria, such as Boko Haram and the Islamic State, and that other conflicts in the country are about disputes over land, not religion. The Nigerian government has also pushed back against the U.S. president's characterization of Nigeria, which he called a disgraced country in a Truth Social post, with Nigerian President Bola Tinubu saying characterization of Nigeria as religiously intolerant does not reflect our national reality. Later, an advisor to Nigeria's president said that he would welcome U.S. assistance if it recognizes the country's territorial integrity. The U.S. doesn't really have military operations close to Nigeria at the moment. The country completed its withdrawal of about 1,000 troops from Niger last year, north of Nigeria. But as with many things with the U.S. president, it's unclear whether his recent threats against Nigeria should be taken literally or seen more as an attempt to exert pressure on the country's government or to appease some members of his strong evangelical Christian base here in the U.S. Ira Spetzer, Washington.
Meanwhile, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu is preparing to finalize the appointment of envoys to foreign missions 2 years after his decision to recall all ambassadors from Nigeria's 109 foreign missions, comprising 76 embassies, comprising 76 embassies, 22 high commissions and 11 consulates. And to discuss this further, we are joined on the line by Frank Tete, a lawyer based in Abuja, a human rights activist and development advocate. Frank, good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon, and always my pleasure.
You know, Frank, just reading this and following what's been happening and unfolding, what do you make of the threats of U.S. President Donald Trump to stop aid and start military action? Should they be taken lightly?
No, they are not being taken lightly at all in Nigeria. Many Nigerians believe that it's a welcome relief because Nigerians have had to endure many years of lethargic responses by the Nigerian government to these issues of insecurity, wanton killings, and this time around being alleged by the Christian communities in north-central Nigeria, especially that the killings have taken a genocidal dimension. So the threats by Donald Trump were actually seen as a highly welcome thing by many, not only in the Christian faith, but in the southern part of the country, and then across the entire country, except that there are so many people who are expressing doubts as to the real intentions of Donald Trump, if indeed he wants to, put action to the words of the threat that he has made.
And I want to just go to what you just said, the real reasons, so to speak, or the alleged reasons, or the possibility. Is it, I've heard some analysts speaking of the fact that Nigeria has oil reserves and are we going there now? Is that the biggest challenge that Nigeria could be facing?
I very much doubt that because the oil and gas resources of Nigeria are firmly being controlled by the Nigerian government. There are deals already in place that see to the exploration and exploitation of crude oil being marketed abroad. The Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited is on top of that. So it's far from this resource, the idea that it's resource based. What I think is really happening is that if the Americans are actually thinking of getting into Nigeria, then we must recall what the reports we just listened to said, that this is probably a serious Christian drive. It's not just the propaganda, but I think the Christian community in the United States is actually behind this. And because it serves as a serious political base to Donald Trump, that makes Donald Trump, obligated to make this kind of threat. And I'm and to a large extent certain that Donald Trump is not just making a puff in the air, that he indeed wants to do something. Because the pieces of evidence of killings targeted at Christians in Nigeria cannot just be waved off with like that. However, unfortunately, it is indeed true that Muslims are equally being killed by these terrorists, by these bandits, by these militiamen, whatever guys they come out as Fulani militiamen or Islamic jihadists. They kill Muslims indeed, true. So what would come as a greater relief is when Donald Trump's so-called intervention does not come only as to protecting Christians alone, but as a way of actually driving back, pushing back the presence of Boko Haram, the presence of ISIS fighters, and all these Fulani militias that are coming from other parts of Africa to see that see Nigeria as a fertile ground, as an ungoverned space that can be easily taken by driving away Christian communities, driving farming communities, so that they can take over the lands. So I think that the Americans may just be seen as the persons who are giving some measure of validity to the claims that have been made for many years since the insurgency started in northeastern part of Nigeria. So I think that by and large, the threats by Donald Trump, however, and in what guise that they serve, for whatever motives that they have, actually are very welcoming at this time in the country, speaking.
Now, the presidency officially noted that the presence of ambassadors could have made communication smoother. Could this have been the case?
Yes, indeed. It's actually a disgrace that Nigeria operated for this long without ambassadors in any of these key countries. It's unfortunate to think that we now put economic cost beyond the need for international stability, and then pursuing the interests of our country at the international scale. To think that we have relegated representation at that level to Naira and Kobo is more or less very disappointing and a huge disgrace to our country. However, it's welcoming too, I must say, that the presidency has now made a commitment that within a matter of a week or two, we could get ambassadors appointed. But should it have reached this point, perhaps if there was an ambassador in the United States that made things clearer to the Americans that it is not only Christians that are being targeted, which is a matter of fact, the Christians are being targeted, but that Muslim communities, whether in Niger State, in north central Nigeria, and other parts of northwestern Nigeria, in Katsina, in Zamfara, are also being killed indiscriminately. Unfortunately, inquiries among Muslim communities is that they seem to tone down the level of killings of the members of the Islamic faith. So we actually have a problem in Nigeria. It's intractable. The Nigerian government, the Nigerian authorities are unable to do much about it to the satisfaction of Nigerian citizens, and that the citizens, generally speaking, whether Muslims or Christians, welcome any intervention that will push back this, grievous, attack by these Islamic terrorists who falsely claim that they are Islamists, because majority of the Muslims that live around us also condemn these acts of terrorism, banditry, and kidnappings that have become rife with this invasion by these militias and these headsmen, whatever they name that they are called, and the jihadists and ISIS and Boko Haram activists. So Nigerians, irrespective of their faith, welcome any intervention that will actually solve this problem, this lethargic, disappointing note on the part of the Nigerian authorities. The Nigerian security forces are practically on their knees, unable to push back. However, we are able to say with some verifiable facts that in the last few days that Donald Trump made those threats, we've seen, the Nigerian security forces stepping up their act in attacking these bandits. So I think that something urgent needs to be done. And if it has taken the Americans or Donald Trump to have made this kind of threat to wake the Nigerian authorities up, even to the point of appointing ambassadors, then I say again, it's a welcome development.
Frank, let's leave it there. Thank you for joining us on Africa Update. That's Frank Tete, a lawyer based in Abuja, human rights activist and a development advocate, joining us on the line.
Ready to connect, innovate, and be inspired? It's all happening at Africa's Tech Festival, where Africa's technology meets the world. From the 10th to the 13th of November in Cape Town, join global leaders, investors, and innovators driving the future of Africa's digital economy. Don't miss the continent's biggest week in tech. Get your pass now at africatechfestival.com.
Your window to the continent and beyond. Africa Update. Only on Channel Africa. Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
The president of the Pan-African Parliament, Chief Fortune Charumbira, has raised concerns about events that unfolded in Tanzania following disputed elections last Wednesday. He was speaking at the opening of the 6th ordinary session of the 6th Pan-African Parliament in Johannesburg in the Gauteng province of South Africa, running for the next 2 weeks. The session is being held under the African Union's theme of the year, Justice for Africans and People of African Descent Through Reparations. Ndlandla Matlang has more.
Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan has been sworn in for a second term amid tight security following an election marred by violent protests and rejected by the opposition as a sham. In his welcoming remarks, President of the Pan-African Parliament Chief Fortune Charumbira says Tanzania is known as a peaceful country and deadly protests that followed after the elections are concerning.
Elections in Tanzania, we haven't had the full report from those that attended or participated, observed elections. We don't have yet a full report, even half report we don't have. But from the media, it shows that we have problems. And if you saw some videos, you see the youth population being very active, even in Tanzania. And the way I know Tanzanians, to me, Tanzania will be the last country on this continent to go to the streets the way they did this time. Tanzanians are very obedient, very disciplined, very, very disciplined. And now to see Tanzanians behave like that, we get scared. What of other countries? This thing may go out of hand on this continent. And Pan-African Parliament is our duty to think through these issues. As PAP, if we are to be of any value, to advise our member states, to advise heads of state, and don't try to predict what the future could be like and what could be done.
The CEO of the African Peer Review Mechanism, Ambassador Marie-Antoinette Rose Quatre, says the continent continues to grapple with critical issues that threaten democratic stability, sustainable development, effective and good governance.
Among these issues is integrity of democratic elections, diversity management, and human rights abuses, as well as corruption. While we welcome free, fair, and transparent elections in most of our member states, as well as peaceful transfer of power in some of our member states, we are also concerned by election-related violence in some of our member states that have been categorized by loss of life, injuries, and destruction of property and public infrastructure. We call on our governments and all stakeholders to guarantee integrity of elections so that people can vote freely and fairly and the outcome becomes a true expression of their will. Integrity of elections is one of the triggers of unconstitutional changes of government. Therefore, it is imperative that we give it priority.
The president of the Global Council for Tolerance and Peace, Ahmed Mohamed Al-Jawan, delivered the keynote address, pledging his support for PEP.
We would like to emphasize our support for all that provides peace and stability in Africa. We would like to emphasize that Africa is not looking for only for peace, but also creates peace. And it's not waiting for future, but it builds the future. We, in the International Council for Peace and Tolerance, which brings together more than 100 parliaments, we are proud of this PAB, which represents a pivotal corner in our parliament system.
The PEP comprises 275 members drawn from all African Union member states and serves as a platform for legislators to deliberate on key continental issues and contribute to policy and decision-making aimed at advancing Africa's development. The current session will run until Friday, the 14th of November, with committee activities and statutory engagements, amongst others. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Ndlandla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
A report by world-leading economists, public health experts and political leaders released on Monday ahead of G20 ministers' meetings, which will be held in South Africa this week, shows that inequality is making the world more vulnerable to pandemics. The report, titled Breaking the Inequality Pandemic Cycle, Building True Health Security in a Global Age, is based on 2 years of research around the world. Sisi Sekhalo was at the launch and has the story.
The report is a result of findings based on 2 years of research around the world. It shows that high levels of inequality are linked to outbreaks becoming pandemics, and that inequality is undermining national and global responses, making pandemics more deadly and longer in duration. The report also shows that pandemics increase inequality, fueling a cycle that research shows is visible not just for COVID-19, but also for AIDS, Ebola, influenza, Mpox, and beyond. Winnie Byanyima, Global Council Convener and UNAIDS Executive Director, elaborates further on their findings.
We found that within countries and between countries, inequality makes us more vulnerable to disease outbreaks becoming pandemics. Within countries, there are social determinants of pandemics. Professor Michael Marmot, who will be online, will tell us more about that. And then between countries, there are inequalities in access to resources, like inequality in access to finance. Joe will speak about that. He's an expert on that. Monica, who's also online, will speak about inequality in access to medicines. Those are key inequalities that drive pandemics. Where these inequalities are biggest, where the most unequal are within their countries and between countries, that is where we see diseases festering and staying.
The Global Council has made recommendations on how pandemic inequality can be tackled, as the new pandemic can be closer. Byanyima again.
First, in the area of finance, addressing the financial barriers that exist, particularly for a region like this one, addressing the debt crisis that stops the investments that are necessary. Secondly, to address the social determinants through which, if you address them, you build the resistance to pandemics, such as housing, social protection, and others. And third, that during pandemics, ensuring that the new medicines that come, the new technologies, are treated like global public goods and that there is access to them. So the importance of regional production of these medicines. And fourth, to build responses when there's a pandemic, to build a response that includes all the sectors that you need, not just the health sector. Right. The finance people, the social protection people, the human rights people, and to put communities at the center of these responses because they reach the last person.
South Africa is hosting the G20 Health Ministers meeting this week and will host the G20 Summit this month. The country's health minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, believes that one of the things that will solve the pandemic inequality is universal health coverage, known as the national health insurance in the country. This is despite the fact that the NHI is facing mounting legal hurdles. He explains further on plans to deal with pandemic inequality in his country.
Our second priority is the pandemic preparedness, which we have got to get ready for. And then thirdly, we talk about the human resources for health. because that's where one of the grossest inequalities manifest. For instance, let's talk about mental health, which is on the increase. 80% of the psychiatrists of all South Africa are serving only 14% of the population. That's how bad this is. But we also need to talk about the scourge of non-communicable diseases, because they are the new pandemic. And lastly, about science and innovation, with local production in the center of that science and innovation.
For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
It's 12:30 Central African Time, and our news headlines up next with Ralani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. Good afternoon. Making headlines. The High Court in Johannesburg, South Africa, has interdicted Operation Dudula from harassing foreign nationals. This means the group, which has turned into a political party, cannot prevent people from entering health facilities or schools, as this is unconstitutional. Sudan's military government is meeting to discuss the security situation. This after the paramilitary rapid support forces captured Al Fasher, the army's last stronghold in the Darfur region. And finally, the body that oversees the European Convention on Human Rights says it's ready to discuss reforms to the treaty as global pressure grows over migration. I will have details on these and other stories at 1 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective. Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
In this hour in our sports update, we begin with football news. Zambian football legend and 2012 African champion Christopher Katongo has hailed the growing competitiveness and unpredictability of African club football following the Total Energies CAF Champions League and CAF Confederations Cup group stage draws held on Monday in South Africa. Katongo, who served as one of the official draw assistants alongside Cameroonian legend Alexandre Song, believes this season's continental competitions will be among the most fiercely contested in recent memory. He highlighted Group C of the Total Energies CAF Champions League featuring Mamelodi Sundowns, Al Hilal, MC Alger and FC St. Eloi Lupopo as one of the toughest, bringing together multiple former champions and in-form sides. The former Chipolopolo captain, who represented Zambia at several major tournaments, emphasized that the evolution of African club football has made both competitions harder to predict and more exciting for fans across the continent and globally. Meanwhile, former Cameroonian international Arsenal and FC Barcelona legend Alex Song is happy to see the rate at which African club football continues to grow with.
Because we're seeing the football African is more going up, like they put more money, and that's we help the club. You know, if you want to be like on the top, you have to have the facility. When you get money, you can have a facility, you can build the players, you can make the structure, and then I'm happy. The way how like the CAF Confederation and Champions League is one of the biggest tournaments after AFCON in Africa.
And South African side, Mamelodi Sundowns have been drawn in the same group with Alger, MC Alger of Algeria, coached by former Sundowns head coach Rulani Mokoena. And Themba Zwane, who is Sundowns captain, reflects on the draw and the prospect of facing Mokoena.
Interesting group, you know, and that's Champions League for you. You know, you don't get to choose who to play. But for us, I think as Sundowns, we are comfortable with the group. I think we have a good team with good players that can get the job done. I mean, we just have to bring our A games to each and every game that we're going to play so that we can qualify for the next group.
And golf news, the Live Golf League announced a slight expansion of its qualifying opportunities for prospective members. The top two finishers at the new Live Golf Promotions event in Florida in January will earn spots in the league for 2026. At previous year's qualifiers held in Dubai and Saudi Arabia, only the winners earned the tour card. The expanded 4-round event, only 54 holes in previous years, will be held from the 8th to the 11th of January at the Black Diamond Ranch in Lecanto, Florida. In addition, the top two finishers in the 2025 International Series rankings who are not already exempt will also earn places in Live Golf for 2026, up from just one exempt granted in previous years. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. With gratitude for the voices, the rhythm, and the dreams that unite us all.
Roho ya Afrika inaishi katika kila hadithi tunayosimulia.
Each new day is a gift, a reminder to pause, to breathe, and to give thanks for the laughter we share and the journeys we take and the stories that shape who we are.
Cada nascer do sol, lembre-te algo pelo qual ser grato. La vie est un voyage, parcourons-la avec gratitude.
Channel Africa. Celebrate the beauty of life with gratitude for the voices, the rhythms, and the dreams that unite us all. This is Africa with Channel Africa, the African perspective. Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Good afternoon, I'm Nosipo Zuma. In your business news this hour, a report released by the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industry, CZI, has revealed that the country's annual inflation rate could halve from current levels by the end of 2025, driven by a stable local currency supported by high gold prices. Now, annual inflation in Zimbabwe measured in the ZiG currency fell sharply to 32.7% in October from 82.7% in September. The CZI expects inflation to decline further, potentially reaching between 15% and 20% by December 2025. Now, this projection is attributed to negative month-on-month inflation in recent months and a stable ZiG currency bolstered by surging gold prices. South African telecommunications infrastructure provider OpenServe says South Africa's largest telecommunication infrastructure provider is working with community stakeholders to ensure that everyone across the country is connected. The telecom subsidiary in South Africa's largest fiber provider, OpenServe, joined the global community in celebration of World Fiber Day at its headquarters in Centurion. The chief commercial officer is Mohosi Mabaso.
Covering fiber in the country, it's not something that you can do on your own, right? So strategic partners with these ISPs is super important, because after we've laid the fiber, all they do, they then leverage their internet on top. Then they take the fiber to their respective portfolios. They play a very key role in the homes, for example. So we've got partners like either AfriHost, Telkom, ISP, Vox, you can name a few of those. We also have those that are in the local communities. They only specifically play, in those specific areas.
South African retailer Pepco has acquired several fashion brands from privately owned Retailability as part of its push into the adult clothing market. The Cape Town-based Pepco has been growing its adult wear categories in recent months through the acquisition of Choice Clothing and the launch of its Ayana women's wear brand. The company, which also sells electronics and furniture, is already a market leader in children's clothing and school uniform markets in South Africa through its PEP and Ackermans brands. Now, there's good news for South Africa's motorists. Fuel prices will decrease across the board with effect from midnight tonight. The Mineral Resources and Petroleum Department says the price of both grades of petrol will go down by 51 South African cents, diesel by between 19 South African cents and 21 South African cents respectively, and illuminating paraffin by 1 South African cent at wholesale price. The department has attributed the decrease in the fuel price to lower Brent crude oil prices and the stronger rand against the US dollar and the period under review. The department spokesperson, Robert Maki.
The following fuel prices will be effective on Wednesday, the 5th of November, 2025. Both grades of petrol will decrease by 51 cents per litre. Diesel 50 ppm will decrease by 21 cents a litre, and diesel 500 ppm will decrease by 19 cents a liter. Paraffin will decrease by 1 cent a liter. Maximum retail price of LP gas will decrease by 61 cents per kilogram countrywide and by 70 cents per kilogram in the Western Cape.
And finally, data from the China Passenger Car Association show that Tesla's China-made electric vehicle sales fell 9.9% to over 61,000 units in October from a year earlier, reversing a 2.8% increase in September. Sales of the U.S. automaker's Model 3 and Model Y vehicles made at its Shanghai Gigafactory, including exports to Europe, India, and other markets, dropped 32.3% from September. Its biggest Chinese rival, BYD, posted a 12% drop in global vehicle sales last month. Your financial indicators: one US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1,436 naira. In Botswana is 13 bula 70. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 20. And in Zambia is 22 kwacha 08. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 38. Russia is 79 rubles 55. India it's 80 rupees 80. China it's 7 yuan 12. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 31. $1 is trading at, looking at commodities rather, gold is trading at $3,993 and platinum at $1,557 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $64.09 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Well, thank you to Nosipho Zuma with our business news. It is 12:42 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Our crime intelligence head, Dumsani Khumalo, has returned to the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, sitting in Pretoria in the Gauteng province of South Africa. He was unable to continue his testimony last month because he fell ill. Since then, various witnesses, including the Hawks Divisional Commissioner Patrick Mboto, have testified. Yesterday, the Chief Provincial Inspector of the Gauteng Traffic Police, George Raftopoulos, and other witnesses shed light on their involvement in the controversial Hawks operation targeting alleged Big Five cartel figures, including Katiso KT Molefe, on the 6th of December in 2024. Now, to give us more analysis, we are joined by Tebogo Khas, a founder and chairperson of Public Interest South Africa. Tebogo, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon, Lulu, and thank you for having me.
Now, what is your observation from the evidence, especially pertaining to policing and accountability?
Look, what it all boils down to, or what it tells us, is that we are in big trouble insofar as accountability in the policing and criminal justice system is concerned. And to the extent that more and more, with each passing day, we get revelations of a kind of systemic dysfunction within the police system, it is cause for concern. And given the fact that public trust in police is at its lowest, it means things are just going to get worse before they get better.
Now, regarding the credibility of the evidence, what have you made of it? We've seen the different witnesses coming in, over the past couple of weeks, and yesterday there were a number of them in the same day. But everything that is brought to the fore is quite explosive and shocking to everyone.
No, quite honestly, you're raising a very important question, because that links also, again, the credibility links to public trust. If you can have a senior police officer heading a unit of Tactical Operations Management, something like the TOMS, within the Hawks, such as Brigadier Mokoena, come and give evidence that seems to be weak at best, and and outright lies at best. It gives cause for concern because it also it's somehow it's comforting to see that you do also have upright men and women in blue who seem to be able to speak truth, no matter how difficult that may be and how career limiting that may very well portend for them. And in that regard, you look at the evidence as it is. Obviously, the commissioners themselves will still have to sit back and sift through the evidence the testimonies that has been given, provided them, including any evidence, and make a finding based on that. But so far, we have seen the overwhelming majority of the evidence received so far seems to be credible evidence, say for one or two instances where a lot of questions are being raised, as I've referred to Brigadier Mokoena, as well as to a large extent Lieutenant General Mboto.
Just speaking of Lieutenant General Mboto, I don't know whether you picked this up, but I think a lot of us did. When he was asked a direct question about interference by the Hawks when they hung around at that property in Sandhurst last year on the 6th of December. And he was asked a direct question whether the hanging around of the Hawks, who were there, made it difficult for the SAPs who were also there doing their work, whether it was interference. And he went round and round without giving a response, and eventually one of the commissioners reminded him at the end that you actually didn't answer that question. Can you answer it? Was it interference? And he did not say yes, but he accepted that it was in a roundabout way.
In a long-winded manner,
Yeah.
It had been difficult to actually extract straightforward answers, which in most instances would require a yes or no response. And that is a sign of somebody not being too forthcoming with the truth and being able to hide certain things, or to make sure that he presents information in a manner that will hopefully absolve him from accountability. And I think the commissioners could see through it all. They may not have exposed him openly or embarrassingly, but he has embarrassed himself by the long-winded answers he's given, and also not saying the obvious, because if you recall very well, Lulu, one of the answers he gave was that they were only there to surveil the place, just to check it out. But how can you check it out under circumstances where you also have just told the commission that there are instances where people who pretend to be the Hawks or the police end up, it could be union police, but not on a legitimate police or official, work. And yet, you cannot then want us to believe you that your intentions were that to actually check to see that an official or a police work has been there, because he stopped short of even insisting on the actual docket case numbers or what exactly is the matter, if they've got a J51 or a J50 in possession. And you could see that in a way, those are the guilty signs of somebody who feels guilty, that in actual fact, he is now being exposed for having a close relationship with one or two individuals who are closer to the fire, including in this instance, Mr. Mthethwa. So you can see that even with bare denials about any relationship with Mthethwa, left a lot more questions than answers.
Another big issue is the oversight bodies being implicated.
That is something very jarring, because if you look at it, you ask yourself, who looks after those who are supposed to look after us? And if those who are supposed to look after those who look after us are themselves found wanting, it just cause for grave concern. I mean, IPIT has been exposed as having been implicated in some of the shenanigans between various sections in the police. I mean, if you look at in recent years or in recent months, there are attempts at investigating Mkhwanazi, Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, which were exposed as a witch hunt or as a manner of trying to fight internal battles, and they actually abandoned that because they were exposed to it. And President Mkhwanazi's intervention with regards to the arrest of a correctional services officer somewhere in KZN. And you ask yourself, what role should the IP be playing in instances where its credibility itself is on the line? And then you take again the parliamentary committees itself. In February, Mkhwanazi first raised these issues with the parliamentary committee, which failed to act. It was only after he had gone and held that July 6th media briefing,
yes,
that he actually, then the parliamentary committee also jolted. It was also jolted after the president instituted a commission of inquiry. So you ask yourself, if those who are meant to look after, to have oversight from a legislator perspective are themselves found wanting and compromised, as we have now seen the likes of Kola Barnard also being exposed as having peddled some information that she ought not to have shared, which was more of a, not even confidential, but secret, top secret. And you ask yourself, what is it that our oversight bodies are up to? And lastly, and but not least, less important, is the actual role of the civilian secretariat of police. What role, if any? Because we never hear anything about its role or the role that it has played throughout all this unfolding drama that is unfolding in front of the public eye. And you ask yourself, where are we? We are grateful for institutions such as the Auditor General, for example, which consistently raises the issues of maladministration and non-performance and also corruption within the police system itself, if you may call it like that, including the tender corruption that we've seen that gives rise to all this infighting and the emergence of the Kite Matalas, whose only purpose is obviously to deplete the resources within the police, to steal from the fiscal, to steal from the procurement budget of the police. And that is where some of the senior police officials get themselves implicated, as it has now been the case with Deputy National Commissioner Sibiya, who's been implicated for having been benefited from Matala's business with a certain amount of money being who would allegedly demand from them to be deposited, given to him. So you ask yourself, what is it if all now the oversight bodies are as compromised as you've rightly exposed them, as you've rightly mentioned? And secondly, we ask ourselves, what is there the public to turn to, given the fact that even the public faith or trust in the police itself is at its lowest?
Another interesting fact that might come out at some point is the NPA head, Shamila Batoyi. She has come out a number of times and basically touched on the fact that there are a number of stumbling blocks that she has faced in her tenure, and now this is now all unfolding in a public domain at the Madlanga Commission and at the Parliament Ad Hoc Committee. How does South Africa emerge from something like this a better country?
To start with, for whatever it's worth, NPA Director Shamila Batoyi should not enjoy public sympathy, because she's responsible for some of the shenanigans that happened in there. Out publicly and even admit that the NPA is infiltrated as she had done, and to later now recant that statement, which was actually true. It shows her integrity herself. It calls to question her integrity. She should have fallen on her sword and make sure that whatever happens to her, if it means it's going to be a career ending, so be it. We have to give credit to the likes of General Mkhwanazi, who put everything on his line to make sure he comes out and speaks the truth. The likes of Shamila Batoyi cannot come themselves as men and women of integrity who stood out for the truth when it might very well not be in their, must have their career very well. So, and also, if you look at some of the work you ought to have done, forget about the state capture prosecutions. Even if you look at matters that had been enrolled, I'm talking here 2009, 2010, to do with the 2010 World Cup infrastructure build. You ask yourself, those matters are still to be to be enrolled within courts, and the blame should lay squarely in the NPA. It doesn't matter who the predecessor to Batoyi was, but the ball falls in Batoyi's court. And even though we can sympathize with her to a large extent that the president did not act when she raised the flag about Gauteng head of the DPP who's now been suspended, she should have insisted and even demanded that she would resign if that matter was not acted on. It's only now, after Mkwanazi, that you saw the president now act. And you ask yourself, where was Batoyi's voice all along?
Well, Tebogo, I wish we had more time because we could go on and on about this. It's a very topical issue at this point in time in South Africa. We are going to leave it there for today. Thank you for joining us on Africa Update. That's Tebogo Khas, founder and chairperson of Public Interest SA, joining us on the line.
Your window to the continent and beyond. Africa Update, only on Channel Africa. Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Well, it is International Stress Awareness Week, observed from the 3rd to the 7th of November. The week raises awareness about stress and the importance of mental health in the workplace. Legal experts say employers who ignore signs of burnout could face serious consequences. Channel Africa's Lebogang Mabange has more.
According to the 2024 SANDC report, 52% of employees have been diagnosed with a mental health condition, while 38% fear losing their jobs due to these challenges. Employment law experts at Cliff Decker Hofmeyer warn that toxic workplace cultures marked by bullying, manipulation and burnout are taking a serious toll on employee well-being and business performance. Chantal Daguvia is the associate in the employment law practice at CDA.
Where an employer recognizes that its employees are struggling with stress or burnout, it's very important for them to reasonably accommodate that employee or employees. And this can take shape in various forms. So it could be by alleviating some of the workload that an employee may have, or subjecting them to a medical examination where a medical practitioner assesses their mental health and is able to provide, medical advice on what to do to alleviate the pressure.
Daguvia says courts are now taking a firm stance against employers who fail to respond appropriately when employees show signs of poor mental health.
What we are noting is that the courts are taking a very firm approach in respect of employers who disregard clear signs of poor mental health and where an employer follows a misconduct route rather than incapacity. And what does this mean? It means that where you're noting one of your employees is perhaps performing poorly or absent from work, and you are aware that it's due to mental illness, they are not taking those steps to ensure that that employee is assisted or accommodated, but rather subject them to a disciplinary hearing. This can result in a constructive dismissal claim, discrimination claim, or even an unfair dismissal dispute.
She adds that being proactive can help companies prevent legal disputes and build supportive, inclusive workplaces.
Mental health challenges in the workplace require employers to balance sensitivity issues against operational needs.
And that report by Lebogang Mabange. Well, we'll say happy Tuesday and good afternoon to Tebogo Lekoleni of the Upside team. How are you today?
Fantastic, Lulu. How are you doing?
I'm great.
Can you believe it's already Tuesday?
I know. I feel like we're rushing towards Christmas.
Everything from October to December feels like it's literally like 2 weeks or a month. It never feels as long as it should be. Here's what's coming up on The Upside this afternoon. We uncover the truth behind, or rather we start off with the emotional and psychological impact for women when it comes to unrealistic beauty standards. We touch on that a little bit. You'll be very interested in that conversation. And then later on, we uncover the truth behind Chris Hani's assassination as retired Judge Chris Nicholson investigates the hidden forces. These are some of the conversations we'll be having today.
Okay, that's a very interesting one. I think we're all looking forward to that one, most definitely. And I guess that's how we wrap Africa Update today. It's been a great Tuesday, a lot covered on the program, and continue with us on our socials. And let us say goodbye. Thank you to our team, Tracy Bumgard, our technical operator, Dumelo Mukwena, social media, Sfiso Hlope, and talent Butelezi. It's been a good one. Let's do this again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
The High Court in